Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to see how to store data in CSV and Json and what are the differences between them. So in Observable, there are many ways of working with data. So whenever you create a new data set, like for instance, let's create some data at random. So let's imagine that we create some random data that is going to create an array of 30 positions. And then I'm just going to do a map out of that and then generate some objects out of that. So then I'm going to say this is going to have a name. Then all of them are going to be called John. And then if I actually start seeing this looking good, full of Johns, maybe to differentiate them, then I can take two parameters in there. The second one is going to be the index. And then I can say John and then many different Johns in there. So now I have a bunch of Johns with all different names. If I want to create an age, so I can just say that this is going to be a random at random, that's between 0 and 1. So let's multiply that by 120. And then let's see that we want int numbers in there. So I can send that to Floor. And then let's say that the height, and I'm going to do the same thing. And this one, I'm actually going to multiply with 2 because I'm counting meters. I'm Colombian, so I'm not weird. So basically, I have a data set. I can actually change this and generate like 300 rows or something like that. And I have just random data. Now, every time you see a cell that contains a data set or an array rather, in Observable, you can click here and say download as CSV. So let's save this as CSV. And then save that also as JSON. So let's save that in here. And then let me come in here in Sublime, and then I'm going to open that again. And then basically what you can see in here is that here you have the CSV file, and let me open the JSON file next to it. And let's start looking at the differences. So the CSV file, it's stored in a matrix format, like in a spreadsheet format. And then it has a bunch of columns. It only repeats, the first one is the header, and the other ones are separated with commas. That's what's called comma-separated file. Whereas the JSON file, it's actually here stored as one long string. So I actually have I think I have pretty JSON. So let me use that, there we go, to actually separate things so it's easier to read. So if you actually take a look at this, let's make it look this bigger. So now you can see that this is an array, and then you can see all the objects. So pretty much what this one is doing is that it's saving that like in JavaScript format, and that's where JSON comes from. It's from JavaScript, it's a JavaScript object. So this one is better in some senses because this data, it's already as a number. It's very straightforward. You can get like a row from here and understand it more easily rather than having to actually come into this other one and then not remembering what each column is. However, this one, it's, as you can see, is repeating name like 300 times. So it's significantly bigger than the other one. The other difference is that you can actually open those CSV files in Excel or create CSV files in Excel. Like for instance, I have a simple one in here. And if I go and say File, Save As, and then you select the CSV UTF-8 format, as you can see here, then you can save that as, let's put it in the desktop too, if I can find my desktop. And then save it, and then come here in Sublime, and then open that data CSV, and then as you can see, it's very simple. So it's also a good alternative for you to generate in some data. So in that sense, CSV, it's more convenient. So usually you will see JSON files whenever it's not that big of a file online, so take that into account. So the way of parsing that on Observable, it's using the D3 library. So let's load that. And then you can just go and load the whole D3. But one of the nice things about D3 is that, especially from version 5 and onwards, it's very modularized. So you can see that there is a bunch of modules. Like for instance, I have here D3 random open. If you go into the GitHub page for D3, then you should see like all of the other modules. So if you search for CSV, then there is another one called D3 DSV. And this is the one that contains a D3 CSV parse and a D3 JSON parse function that allows you to parse that file. So if you go and start creating, like let's say that I take this and then I put this like a CSV text here, so I can put that as a string. This is just a string. Then that is just a string, and then I can create a new cell and say data CSV equals, I guess it looks better like this, and then I just say D3 CSV parse, and then I just enter the CSV text in here, and then that takes me back to my code, to my data, I guess. And then it also has another attribute that is called columns, that is useful for knowing your headers. But notice how it didn't really parse the numbers in there. So if you want to parse that, I recommend you taking a look at the Learn.js tutorial that we wrote for you. That is basically it's an adaptation of this adaptation from the original page Learn.js data. That it's like an older version for D3 version 4 and uses Lodash. This one is for version 5 and uses Lodash, so I created one that it's using only JavaScript and using D3 version 6. So here, if you go into the reading data, you can see lots of information about that. So coming back into my observable, that of course I lost, here we are. So I'm parsing this data. One of the tricks that you can use for parsing that is to pass D3 autotype as a parameter for this. So now this actually allows me to infer the different types, and it's quite effective. So I recommend you taking a look at that. If you want to use the same with JSON, it works exactly the same way. So let's say that you have your JSON text. For be consistent, let's do it like this, and then I come in here and let's say, for sake of comparison, let's do this. So actually, let's take this data and then download it as JSON. Let's say short JSON.json, and then here on Sublime, open that, and then copy this and paste it here like this. Will you do it? There we go. And then for parsing that, and of course I have an error, for parsing that you just do data JSON, and then you say D3, actually there is a parser in the browser that it's called JSON parse, and then I can just parse the JSON text. And then right away, without having to do any parsing, you actually get the right attributes for each one. So remember, the problem is that it's going to be longer. Now, if you are actually loading these on D3 normal, like without observable, usually the way you will be doing this is just by saying D3 CSV, and then you pass an URL, and that URL will be a page where you have that resource. You can also do that here on observable, as long as you provide an URL that it's course enabled. So you can go and search for that, what course means, and like that is basically something for making sure the browser is not loading dangerous data. So if you wanna, and that was the old way of uploading files into observable, is that you can go into something like GitHub and then create a gist. So let's say that I need to sign in here. So do not look at my password too. There we go. And then I'm going to create a new gist. And then in here, I'm just going to paste my JSON. So this is going to be my data JSON.json. And then let's say that I'm also going to create another file. And in that case, I'm going to create this one. So this is going to be my data, csv.csv. So when I do that, then I can go and say I want to create a public gist, all of this. So when you do that, then this is a piece of code that is hosted by GitHub. And then it has the two files, and you can go and see here the raw version of it. So when you go and see the raw version, that gives you a new URL, and then you can load that URL, like using, for instance, which one was that? That is the JSON one. So you can actually go and say, load this JSON in here, and then that returns your data. Again, normally the way you will do that on regular in JavaScript with outside observable, you will do something like either you do a then in here, and then you say, like you say, here is my data, and then you can start working on your data here, like console log data. This is the normal way you will do it outside, or if you want to use await, you can say something like const data equals await this. Okay, so now you can have that, and in this case, just return the data here. But actually, observable handles all of that for you, and if you just do this, then it will await for the promise to respond, and then also return the data immediately. So this is very convenient, but remember that it's not so easy when you are outside it. So let's say data 3 because it's too much. Then the final thing that it's important to mention is that you can also come in here and then add file attachment. So you can come here and say, I want to upload, and then let's say that I want to upload in my, where are you? Desktop, like this data CSV file. And then when you do that, then you immediately get that data here. Then you can copy that, and that is going to give you access to one of the APIs from Observable. You can always, that is an object that has a text and then also a .json if the file is JSON. And then you can just do D3 CSV parse out of that. So one way is wait for the promise, then get the response and parse that on D3 CSV parse, and then you get the file. If you want to do the D3 autotype, then you do it like here. And another alternative is actually what I was about to write, that it's something like this. You can do this, but if you do it like this, then it's going to fail because this doesn't return the text. You have to actually, it returns a promise. So you can do it like this, and then the autotype will be here, okay? If you upload as JSON file in here, then you can also do D3 JSON in here. Finally, let's see if I remember how to do this. Like, you can also let people load local data. So for that, you just need to say, I'm going to create an input of type file. And then that input, you can render that like that. And then, of course, I always forget something here, like this maybe. Yes, input type file. And then you say, my file is this. And then when you do that, then you can let the people or the person or the user select what is the file that they're going to load. And then just by looking at my file, they are going to get the HTML element. But remember, if you say this is a view of, then this cell returns the HTML. And then the other one will actually return the file that you want. So there is an, if you search on observable, like let's get here a new one so I don't lose the one I'm in. So files, I hope this time I get the other one, like maybe this one is the one I'm looking for. Yes. So take a look at this notebook, and basically what you're going to learn in there is that the way of loading that is using a part of the standard library for observable that says files. And then you can say, I'm going to convert this into a text. And then let's say, going to pass this as my text, hopefully. And then, of course, I'm missing something still. Oh yeah, maybe it's, I need to load a file and then I can do this, and then you will get the actual value. Notice how if you don't pass a default attribute initially, then it's going to fail. So there is also another observable that Mike Bostock has here, like this is with an initial value, and actually that came from an idea for myself. So you can import this one and then put that here, and then say that you want to create a new file input, and then this is also my file, like that. And then this also has to be a view of because of the same reason. And then you say this. And then when you select what is the file, then it's going to return this. And then also my file, it's returning here, what, the text maybe? Here we go. So now you can actually get the text out of that if you want. And if you want to have an initial value, then you can say here, where are you? Here. So you just say initial value and what are the type of files that you accept. So in this case, I'm going to have this, and then the initial value is going to be, for instance, one of the file attachment. Let's say that I want to load the data.csv and then convert something like this. And then there we go. So now I have that value, and if I hope like this, or maybe let's do it like this. This is the initial value, and then so I can get this, and then when and then to parse it actually, CSV parse await this. So I have the data. So this is the default data, and then if I go and I load this one, that it might be bigger, then it will create a bigger one. So that's the third way of doing that. So remember, the takeaway from this is you can either store data with CSV or JSON. There's also other formats. CSV tends to be smaller. JSON allows you to create hierarchies and objects. I didn't show any of that. But it takes more space. So use them depending on the needs.